Good morning, everyone. Hopefully, you are having a terrific Ignite. Today, we are on the last day of Ignite, but again, the sessions and the excitement doesn't go down. We're talking about one of the hottest topics in this Ignite, which is resiliency. Well, maybe not the hottest. After Copilot, this is the second hottest. And that's what we're going to go focus on in the next 45 minutes or so around data resiliency and cyber recovery. I am 𝗦𝗽𝗀𝗀𝗶𝗀𝗀, the Group Product Manager for Azure Resiliency. Alongside me, I have Rohan Sahini, my colleague. All right, let's move forward. Before I start talking about data resiliency and cyber recovery, I would like to establish a few fundamentals that we have been chatting about throughout this Ignite about resiliency. If you had the opportunity to attend our sessions yesterday, Breakout 217, Breakout 148, we did cover at depth on our new portal announcement on resiliency in Azure. That is what we are excited to talk about here in the next few slides. Well, when we think about resiliency, we divide it into three parts. The first, when as Microsoft or as Azure, we have laser focused in terms of the foundational capabilities to ensure that our services by default are resilient. With that said, as you run mission critical applications on Azure, you would still need to go configure for added protection on top of what we offer by default. That's where the resiliency tools comes into picture. All of that is enabled by the resiliency features or capabilities. And in the last several years, we have had multiple experiences which help you understand these and deploy these at scale. We have Advisor for recommendations, as an example. We have Azure Backup, which allows you to enable protection. You have Chaos Studio for enabling fault simulation. You have observability, which allows you to look at the health of your application. What we are doing at this Ignite, and that is the exciting part of it, is we are bringing it all together under one single umbrella. And that's what the resiliency portal is all about. Now, when I say resiliency, how do we look at resiliency? Resiliency for us is now divided into three pillars. And this is something that we have been listening to a lot of inputs from customers as we have been closely collaborating with them since last Ignite. Yesterday in Breakout 148, this was discussed in Chicago last year when customers had come to us and talked about how do you reimagine resiliency. That is from where we built our core concepts of what we have here. We are dividing it into three pillars. First, the infra resiliency. Think about anything that you need to do for high availability. That is where zonal resiliency comes into picture. Second is data resiliency. That's where Azure Backup, Azure Site Recovery, your ability to go take backup for short-term retention for oops delete scenarios or creating new instances, to going and taking backup for compliance-related requirements is what is data resiliency. And then finally, as customers have started maturing their journey on Azure or any hyperscaler, attacks are not uncommon. And to protect you from these attacks, the different ransomware threats that you have, that is where we are focused in terms of the cyber recovery solutions, to enable you to restore at scale rapidly so that you do not have disruption. Let me ask you a question. How many of you are familiar with Azure Business Continuity Center? Quite a few of you. That is exactly what we are reimagining as resiliency in Azure. That is where we are expanding from what we were doing with backup and restore and Azure Site Recovery to expand it with the infra resiliency capabilities. That is why I said that's the one-stop shop where you can actually go and enable resiliency at scale, irrespective of whatever your requirements are. Yesterday in Breakout 148, we did chat at length about infra resiliency. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but at a very high level, think about recommendations for enabling zonal resiliency powered by Azure Advisor, to being able to deploy these recommendations using Copilot or the resiliency agent, which I'm excited to also talk about later in this session. And then finally, being able to validate that the recommendations that you have deployed are actually enabling true resilience for you from a zonal resiliency standpoint is where we have drills. Today's focus, though, is going to be on data resiliency and cyber recovery. We are going to focus on Azure Backup, Azure Site Recovery. We have certain exciting announcements, which you will see as I walk you through some of the demos on Microsoft Defender for Cloud, on how it integrates with Azure Backup and gives you the confidence from a cyber recovery standpoint. And then there are a bunch of other security features which are absolutely necessary today for you to be confident about what you back up, that it should work if you need it. Before I dive deep into data resiliency and cyber recovery, I wanted to show you this slide. And what we have learned in the last few years is resiliency is not something that you do once and you forget about it. You need to constantly ensure that your applications or resources stay resilient. And that's a journey. You can deploy or start resilient, but over a period of time, you might be running applications which become critical and they are not resilient, so you need to get resilient. And then finally, you might actually be having config drift, which you're not aware of, and that can also cause lack of resiliency, which is where you have the opportunity to ensure that you stay resilient with the experiences that we help you with. In all of this, we actually bring you the surface of your preference. If it's at scale, we have PowerShell CLI with the API surface. If it's for the portal experiences, that's where I talked about the resilience experience. And then the most exciting piece that we are launching now, and we are going to continue to enhance and improve it, is the resiliency agent, which should make it seamless and simple as you go through your journey of resiliency. With that, let's now start diving deep into data resiliency and cyber recovery. Again, I'm not going to talk to you about a variety of different features or capabilities that we are launching. Obviously, that will show up the backend in the roadmap section. But what is important is we are lockstep in with you in terms of the workloads that you run. Whether you are running an infrastructure as service workload, in this case, you have a two-tier VM example. The front-end tier can be a web tier or a load balancing set of servers, or the back-end tier, which can host a database. Or if it's a cloud-native workload, which runs the container on Azure Kubernetes service, and then on the back end, you have platform as a service database, like PG/SQL or Cosmos DB. We have you covered for data resiliency and cyber recovery. Me and Rohan are going to actually walk you through these capabilities one by one, with the first scenario being on infrastructure as service workload. Let's move us forward. All right, as I said, for infrastructure as service workload, if you remember, I talked about the two-tier application. There is the front-end tier, which is a VM, virtual machine. And then the back-end tier, let's assume it contains a database, which in this case can be a SQL Server or SAP HANA. We do have support for SAP AC as well. We have got you covered. What you see on the left-hand side here are the variety of capabilities which are important for you to ensure that your data resiliency is at the place where you would like it to be. Whether you need short-term backup for oops delete scenarios, whether you need long-term retention for compliance requirements, we have you covered. We cover all the latest SKUs on VMs that come to the market by default as soon as they go live. And we also ensure that we cover you irrespective of whether you are running Windows or Linux operating system. Similarly, for databases, we have support, as I said, for SQL, HANA, and Sybases. The recovery point objective can be as low as 15 minutes that we support today. And we also ensure that we are aware of the HA configurations depending on the database that you're using. But the exciting part is on the cyber recovery capabilities. If you think about it, when you take backup, you need to feel confident that you should be able to restore from it. You should feel confident that even if your tenant was under attack, you still did not get attacked with the backup that was taken, and the backup allows you to restore at scale. That is where we have capabilities of making it air-gapped. The vault is created in the Microsoft tenant, and we provide a bunch of different capabilities, including multi-user authorization, to soft delete, to write once, read many times, immutability, so that you are comfortable and confident that the backup that you are taking is actually foolproof for you to restore should the need arise. Finally, in partnership with Microsoft Defender for Cloud, we are excited at Ignite to launch the ability to go scan your restore points. So you are at peace now, apart from everything that I talked about in terms of security, to be able to understand that your workload, the restore points that you are taking, are actually foolproof, and you can restore from it with confidence. Let's look at a demo. All right, as I said, recapping again, the two-tier application. There is the web tier, which has the virtual machine. The backend tier has the database, which is SQL Server. First, I'm going to show you the virtual machine backup. As I said, you go to the Resiliency portal experience from the main portal plate. You go click on Configure Protection. You have Azure. You click on Azure Virtual Machines. Click on Continue. You move forward. You can select a vault. In this case, I already have a vault, which I have pre-selected. And then as I go forward, there are two types of policies, enhanced and standard. Enhanced gives you greater granularity of number of backups. In this case, I will go and create a new policy. I have a variety of options, as I was talking about. I can decide on how frequent my backup should be. I can go down and look at the retention policy. If I want to enable tiering, which means that I want to take backups out on tape, I can do that as well. And finally, again, one other thing that we have heard from our Linux customers is on crash consistency, agentless backup. That is something that we are enabling. In this case, I will go and select it, and then I will move forward and click OK. Now, as the policy is selected, I would go and pick the virtual machine, the web tier VM that I showed you, I pick up in this case, and I go enable backup. Voila, that's it, done. That's how simple it is right now. Virtual machine backup. Next, on the data tier, in this case, I'm not going to take a virtual machine. I'm going to take the SQL Server. Once again, I go into the Resiliency portal, configure protection. In this case, instead of the virtual machine, I pick up SQL in Azure. You have a bunch of other workloads as well. We will talk about it. We go select the vault, the same vault that I picked up last time. Click on Continue and move us forward. It has recognized the SQL Server. It has identified the database. I go back to the backup goal, and now I go and configure backup. In this case, as I said, I wanted the RPO to be as low as 15 minutes. So I'll pick a policy, and I'll go and make a change, where instead of every 2 hours, I go and make it 15 minutes, which is the lowest granularity. And obviously, because I'm taking backups so frequently, I want to enable compression, and then I want to move these restore points after 45 days. And that's it. I go look through all my options, and then I pick up the database. In this case, I pick up master and MSDB on the database server. As I do that, I click on Enable Backup. The third thing that I'm going to show you in this demo is the cyber recovery solution that I was talking to you about, Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Again, in this case, the security vault that I had picked up, you can ignore the security setting. It will show up as weak. I will show you a Copilot demo on how to change it later. But at this point of time, my focus is on threat detection, which shows up as configured. I do have other options as well, which we'll talk about later. Once I go and click on View Details and then click on Backup Items, I can pick up Azure Virtual Machine. Right now, we have this enabled for only VMs, but we are going to expand this very quickly to all other workloads. You can look at the details of the restore points. You will see the recent scan status. There would be the ones where there is a malware detected, which will show up as suspicious. The one where it is not, you can go and restore VM. So just to kind of recap, what I showed you there were three things. One, for a two-tier application, the front tier of the virtual machine, I took a virtual machine backup. For the backend tier, I had the database running on it, so therefore I decided to take the backup for the database. And then finally, to be confident about the restore points that I'm creating, if they are clean, for me to be able to restore in future from them if the need arises. I showed you how Microsoft Defender for Cloud allows me to scan these restore points. With that, we'll now move to the second scenario, which is on platform as a service, the database at the backend, and then a container with Azure Kubernetes, which is what Rohan, my colleague, is going to cover.
So as organizations modernize their applications, many move from VM-based IaaS architectures into cloud-native designs built on microservices and managed databases. This shift brings flexibility as well as scale, but it also fundamentally changes how resiliency must be approached. In a cloud-native model, you are no longer protecting a single server or a single database. You are protecting an interconnected application of Kubernetes resources with the cloud-native databases, configurations, and the underlying data sources, services that power the entire platform. Because of this, we need to think it differently. On your screen, you would be seeing a two-tier architecture where the application tier or the microservices tier is a AKS cluster, followed by the Azure databases, which could be a PostgreSQL server. At the application layer, Kubernetes environments evolve quickly. Services scale, your pods restart, and the workloads keep shifting across nodes. Backup needs to keep pace with that dynamism. However, when we say that containers require backup, we have received questions multiple times that why would your stateless resources require backup? The answer to that is the benefits that your containers provide you about changing your applications continuously across a year or a month or a week. How are you going to know which application configuration was the best one for you? You need to have that history. That's where you can use your AKS backup. Backup is the experience for Azure Resiliency is built to protect the entire application context, the workloads running in the cluster, the persistent volumes they depend on, and the ability to bring them up again in a controlled application-aware manner. On the data side, managed databases like PostgreSQL demand durability, regulatory, as well as compliance needs. Along with this, you also need your data to have the protection against accidental or malicious data losses. The backup experience focuses on strong safeguards, vaulted storage, isolation, and long-term recoverability. Together, these capabilities give cloud-native teams a consistent model. The application tier gets recovery aligned with Kubernetes dynamism, while on the other hand, your data tier gives you enterprise-grade protection. Before I move ahead, now I would just like to give you an understanding of how many different types you can use to not just protect, but to ensure your cyber recovery. Till now, Amit had shown you how to protect it through the Azure Resiliency blades. For your first part of the demo, you will see a Kubernetes cluster that is going to be protected from the resource itself. The Contoso prod cluster that you're going to see, you will see the option of backup directly on the screen of the resource. After that, for your PostgreSQL, we again go back to the same method from the Azure Resiliency. So let's take the case of John, who is a senior cloud engineer at Contoso, and he is managing a loan processing platform. The AKS or the Kubernetes cluster with the containers has all the applications, while the database tier will be having the transactional data, which is very important for him. His main goal after having modernized his applications is to make it the most resilient system. So for this, I will start with the demo. On your screen now, you will see that the two-tier architecture, as we explained earlier, is visible. This is our focus. First, we will protect the Kubernetes. For that, first we will start with the namespaces. Under the namespaces, you are going to see the most important applications and the namespaces that this cluster has. Once you have seen that, we scroll down to the menu, and under backup, you get the option of a plus symbol. With the plus backup, you select your vault. The vault gives you the capabilities to not just store your data, but also has all your metadata as well for the backup. Once you click on next, you get the policies, and once you go next, you can see on your screen that the policies that I was talking about are mentioned there. You get the frequency as well as the retention period. After that, it's simple. You now just need to select your data source. When you go and select your data source, you will see in the drop-down that you can select all or one of the namespaces. This shows you the power of granularity in the case of not just backup, but also when you're going to restore it. And after this is done, you validate. Once the validation is completed, you know that the backup readiness is completed, and you can just go and configure backup. Now, your configuration of backup takes some time, and after that, you have your benefits on your screen: the granular restores and flexible data protection. Moving forward, now we are going to protect the PostgreSQL. For PostgreSQL, from the Resiliency blade, we select the data source type as PostgreSQL Flexible Server. Then we again go to the vault. This is the same vault that we were using earlier, the Contoso Peoples DB. After that, we select the policy. Again, you have a choice either to select or create a new one. Now, we select the database. On your screen, you can see the Contoso PG-SQL has been selected. And once done, the validation runs, and you are shown that the backup readiness check is completed. And once after that, you configure your backup. And after that, you see on your protected items the list of resources that have been protected. On double-clicking on this resource, on your bottom of the screen, you can see that the protection has been configured. This leads us to the benefits that we get from this PostgreSQL backup. It's not just vaulted backups with long-term retention, but also unified backup monitoring and alerts as well. Now, moving forward, as organizations scale in the cloud, the unstructured data that becomes one of the most critical tier of the estate. It can be the file shares, the analytics data on the ADLS, and large object stores that power the modern workloads. Protecting this layer requires more than just copies of data. It requires isolation. It requires the ability to recover every time when the primary environment or a disaster situation comes into picture. The cyber recovery capabilities helps us not just by providing you a soft delete or a immutability, but also the immutability, soft delete, and the multi-user authentication provides strong guardrails against accidental deletes as well as any malicious attacks. This gives storage admins and platform teams the confidence, and the foundational data layer remains recoverable all the time, always compliant and secure. Following this, now I would like to invite Amit back to take us forward.
All right, we showed you a lot of stuff across the two different kind of workloads, the storage solutions. Let's just try to bring it all together. Obviously, what you saw, and I hope you realize that irrespective of the type of workload that you use, Azure Backup provides you the same consistency in terms of the capabilities that you can get. And that's what this slide shows you. Right at the bottom there are the different types of workloads that we support. You did see a few of them in terms of the demos for VMs, for Azure Kubernetes Service, for PG-SQL. But then outside of that, the databases as well, Azure Files, Azure Blobs, Azure Disks, on-premise services as well. That's what we are having in terms of coverage today, and we continue to expand this coverage. Anything that you are using which needs native protection, we are either there or we are building that. Next, in terms of security, which is really what you need when you take backups, because if your backup is not secure, your whole purpose of taking the backup is defeated. That's where we have made tremendous investments in the last couple years, which is what shows up here. The vaulted technology that we both talked about, it has immutability, it has soft delete. Soft delete being, even if you had an accidental delete, it remains there for 14 days. Immutability is there at both the vault as well as at the storage layer for most of the workloads that we support. We have multi-user authentication. We support private endpoints. And from a compliance standpoint, anything which is out there that needs us to be compliant to the latest benchmark, we are always doing that. From a management standpoint, while a lot of the experiences you saw was via the Azure Resiliency experiences, we do have these experiences also embedded into each of these resources by default. Be it VMs, when you go create a VM from the portal, you do have the blade of configuring backup. Similarly, Rohan showed you for Azure Kubernetes Service as well. And the places where it doesn't exist, we are constantly continuing to move that forward. But again, your one-stop shop should be resiliency experiences on Azure. So anything that you want to do, you should be able to do from there. Next, the vaults. The vaults allow you to configure backup for different workloads. Sometimes it can get difficult for you to identify which resource is being backed up on which vault. We are supported by Azure Resource Graph, so you would be able to kind of go back and do that mapping. From a monitoring standpoint, it is integrated or tightly coupled with Azure Monitor. So anytime your backup jobs run, they fail, they succeed, you would be able to get all of that information. Azure Advisor is tightly integrated as well. From a data resiliency standpoint, for most of these workloads, if you do not have data resiliency configured, it will come back and let you know. And then the Copilot assistance, which I will show you after this, is something that we are excited about and we are continuing to build and accelerate to help you become more resilient by default. Now, I did talk about Azure Backup, but let me also talk about Azure Site Recovery. Yesterday in Breakout 148, you actually did see some extensions of Azure Site Recovery. From a recovery orchestration standpoint for any kind of workload, that is where we are truly headed. Today, Azure Site Recovery actually allows you to enable region A to region B moves for virtual machines. We also support any kind of hybrid scenario. If you're on-prem, either VMware, physical machines to Azure. Again, as I said, from an operating system standpoint, Windows, Linux, both are supported. We support app and crash consistent replication. From a replication standpoint, our RPO is as low as 15 minutes, and the SLA of 99.9% that we are proud of, and we constantly monitor that. Some of the exciting capabilities that we have recently launched has been on increasing the throughput of when you actually go run your replications. And similarly, from one region to the other region, sometimes if you do not have capacity for the same VMs queue, we do recommend an alternate VMs queue as well, which ensures that as you use Azure Site Recovery and move from site A to site B, you actually do not run into a failure due to capacity. As I was explaining earlier, Azure Site Recovery today works for virtual machines, but we are already expanding this to the recovery orchestration for additional workloads, which you saw yesterday, and we are continuing to move this forward. Now, this is my exciting part, which I really like talking about. You did see the resiliency agent feature across a variety of keynotes, right from Judson's to the keynotes of 𝗦𝗽𝗲𝗶𝗫 and Jeremy. Yesterday, we did show you Copilot-enabled ability to go look at zonal resiliency posture and thereby generate scripts which you can actually go deploy and be resilient. What I'm going to show you as part of data resiliency and cyber recovery are two-dimensional capabilities. One, where imagine you have protection enabled, but if you are wanting to expand that protection, Copilot actually helps you configure it. And then the second dimension is, if you remember when I was showing you the security of the vault, which was actually poor, if I want to go make change to that, I would be able to do that. So let's move forward. All right, as I said, the first one is on expanding protection. In this case, we will look at virtual machines, which are protected by Azure Backup. Here is Nandini, who wants to look at what are the data sources protected with Azure Backup. It goes back, identifies that, comes back and lists that out. Once that is listed, it asks if you want to enhance protection with Azure Site Recovery. Once you select yes, enhance protection, it automatically opens the configure disaster recovery page with Azure Site Recovery. Second demo here is on enhancing the security posture of the vault. Remember the vault that we had taken previously? Now Nandini can go back and look at the summary of the security configuration for all the vaults that she is using. They are classified under poor, excellent, and so on. Now, if she wants to go back and improve it, it identifies that it's poor and it wants to make it fair. She can pick either the portal or any other experience, and then it identifies what is not enabled. And if the user gives the permission, in this case Nandini, as she gives the permission, it just goes and enables it on her behalf. That is how easy we have made it. You do not really need to worry about it. You can work with Copilot, we can work with the resiliency agent. It would actually do it on your behalf as long as you give it the permission to go do that. We're kind of coming to the back end of our presentation here. These are all the resiliency announcements at Ignite. I will keep this for you to take pictures. But at a very high level, I wanted to highlight a few key callouts. One, we did talk about Azure ADLS Gen 2 that we are protecting. There are also a bunch of capabilities for Azure Site Recovery that I was talking about that has been released. The crash-consistent, agentless backup for VMs, something that a lot of our Linux customers have asked, especially who run sensitive workloads and do not want to have agents integrate with their virtual machines. And yeah, and then there are the other capabilities around infra resiliency, which is something that we talked about at depth in our preceding sessions, including the resiliency agent, which is something that we are launching now, and we are continuing to accelerate the momentum with it. That kind of brings us to the end of our session. Azure Accelerate is something that you can look at. It's been talked about in other sessions as well. Yes. If you like this session and you haven't had an opportunity to look at some of the other sessions that I was referring to, Breakout 178, Breakout 148, Breakout 217, the labs that happened, the labs of course didn't get recorded, but the other breakout sessions did get recorded. So if you get an opportunity when you go back, do listen to those as well. And yeah, that's it. Here we are.